dress code jokes this morning.
I told somebody I thought they'd come.
Yeah. It was like running a dog.
Okay, good morning, and welcome to the first legislative coffee of the year. So nice to see so many here. You could be back in New York where it's snowing and you can't get out, so we got something to be thankful for. Going to make a few announcements. Yes, I can hear it. Can you hear it? All right. I've got ears, but okay. We want to thank the Ottawa Chamber of Commerce Legislative Action Committee is one of the sponsors for this coffee. The Franklin County Farm Bureau Association, American Legion Post number 60. We also want to thank the Republican Central Committee for the refreshments, and there are plenty of refreshments there. Nobody has an excuse for going away hungry. City of Ottawa providing this facility and coffee, and of course Matt back there with Access Channel 23. If you haven't noticed, it used to be 20, now it's 23. And I might remind you, this is live. So watch what you say about folks. Smile.
Kind of used to that.
You're live. Couple announcements. The next legislative coffee will be February 13th here at City Hall. On February 25th, the Chamber will be doing a legislative trip to Topeka. They did this last year with the leadership class. It's an opportunity to go up and meet you, have lunch with your legislators, tour the Capitol, and so forth. So you got about a month to think about that, and the next month we'll have a sign-up sheet for those that want to go. And one small thing, it's $45 per person. That includes the bus and your lunch. We want to thank our senators and representatives, Senator Tyson, Representative Finch, and Representative Jones for being here on this bright, sunshiny day. And they have all sorts of good news for us from Topeka. You've been in session for not quite 2 weeks, and you've solved all of our problems. Okay. Before we get into questions, there were some questions that were passed out to you. Those are some questions that we may ask. We're sure that there's other questions that you have. A few simple rules. You ask a question, make it short, no two-parters, and no statements. Questions only. The representatives will be around senators will be around to meet with you after if you want to go into more detail. We want to have everybody an opportunity to ask at least one question before we get on something else, and we don't want to beat a subject to death, because there's plenty of interesting things out there and questions and things that we have. Okay, now to our panel. I have one simple rule. Be brief and to the point. I know that's tough, but there's only 3 of you. And what we'll start out is we'll give each of you 5 minutes to give an update on where you think we're at, where you think we're going. Please keep it to 5 minutes so we have plenty of time for questions. And you might also tell us what committees you're on. We know some of you are on the same committees as last year. We know some of you have switched committees for whatever reason. And so with that, we'll start with Senator Tyson.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to see the crowd here, especially with the weather the way it is. And thanks for the sponsors and for the refreshments. I appreciate that, and I know everyone does. Where we're going, where we're at, and where we're going to go. Interesting. You know, it was the first 2 weeks of session, and obviously we're getting started. We kicked off with the Budget, Ways and Means Committee. My committee assignments haven't changed, and for most of you, you know, I've got some heavy hitters: Ways and Means, Tax, Education, Natural Resources, and then some subcommittees. So an extremely busy schedule, but I appreciate it. And what happened, the governor proposed the budget last week, gave us his budget, and the Senate committee sent it back. The budget that was presented by the governor did not balance. And so the senators said, we're going to send it back to you, and we want a budget that balances. We know you've spent more than this, and this isn't where we're at, so let's give us a clear picture here. So we'll see what we get from that. The other interesting thing was on Ways and Means, Wildlife and Parks purchased 157 acres of land in Cloud County, Kansas. Well, you may think that sounds like a good thing, maybe for refuge or protection of the land or something. Well, I asked what they're going to do with this acreage, and they're going to rent it out, rent it back to farmers and keep farming the land. So 157 acres for $716,000, and they're going to rent it back. So, yeah, it just makes you wonder what they're thinking in Topeka. And what none of the legislators were even aware of this, that it was going to happen. Another bill that they're trying to slide through, in fact, it was announced as a non-controversial bill. Tax notices, the appraiser gives a notice when they go through a certain routine. They put a public legal notice in the newspaper. And most of us rely on those newspapers to get our legal notices. Well, they didn't want to have to post that notice anymore. So we'll see how non-controversial that bill is. But anyhow, so like I said, we're just getting started on the work, and we've got a long way to go. But we'll definitely work diligently to work for this area. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sponsors and folks who brought the refreshments. That's really cool, and thank you for coming out on a cold Franklin County morning, and that's okay. I guess when we get started up there each year, there's a lot of what I would call, like from the military, Joe rumor, just rumors, things that could come up, things that might come up, things that are coming up, and we're like, there's no way that's going to come up, and stuff like that. So you have an idea of certain things that are definites, budget issues, things like that, and then you have things that you just don't know about. In my district, south of here, I actually get Osawatomie State Hospital, and that's something that's definite, and that's something that's already been coming up. So, and I'm going to talk real quick just about things that are really affecting my district. Osawatomie State Hospital, obviously Karen's district, is a big issue right now. Lots of rumors, lots of issues dealing with that. Personally, I would have liked to get some direction from the governor in the state of the state, just because of how it affects all the areas around it. It affects our sheriff and our police department, our mental health centers. They get backed up, and this is an issue that if you don't deal with it, take care of it, have vision for it, and have a finish to it, it's gonna bite you. So it's one of those things that I don't like to be on the defensive on. I personally have a vision for it, and I've just kind of been waiting for and I've shared that with those in leadership. So I'm hoping to get, that's kind of where I'm really focusing right now. But besides that, this year I was switched, and I was talking to some folks beforehand about leadership and the switching from Health and Human Services, which I was on, which would have dealt with like Medicaid expansion and things like that. I was switched to education. I asked for that a couple years ago. Asked for it this past year too. I didn't ask to get switched off of Health and Human Services, but that's what they ended up taking me off of, and they put me on education. So that's been interesting. We've already even listened. I was talking to one of the superintendents this morning about merit pay, but again, there's rumors that tend to fly. So I'm already getting questions on consolidation and things like that. I've had other representatives hand me stuff dealing with that kind of thing, and to be fair, I think they're looking for ways to save money, to do exactly what many politicians have said, to get money from areas they don't want to into the classroom. And so, but again, it's not for sure on those. But so I'm on education. I'm also on pensions and benefits, dealing with a lot of the same stuff. We heard just a catch up on the bonding, how our state bonded out about just over $1 billion, and that there's a lot to that, but ultimately it's to help the unfunded liability to help it equal out. And there's some things that I didn't know about, too. I did not vote for that, but it's, yeah. So you can ask questions on that. I'm also put on financial institutions and insurance and financial institutions put together. So now you have legislators that were on financial institutions asking questions about insurance, and people who are on insurance asking questions about financial institutions and banking and that kind of thing. So it's a huge committee, but dealing with pretty important stuff. And I'm also on military, veteran, homeland security. And so ask me any questions on that, anything that we've heard or things that you'd like to hear on that. That would be great. Lastly, things that are affecting my district from the south, we got wind energy, the windmills coming, Colony area, Greeley area. They had a meeting down in Greeley a couple months ago. I talked to energy folks about that. Industrialized hemp, the efficiency study, obviously. And then, yeah, I'll stop there, but lots of questions, lots of things to keep our eyes out for. But ultimately, I appreciate being here and look forward to your questions. And also, make sure you sign up for our newsletters and just contact us if you have any questions. So,
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you all for coming out this morning. I'm Blaine Finch. I represent the Ottawa, Franklin County, kind of the western part of Franklin County. Representative Jones has the eastern part, and then 3 townships over in Osage County, the 3 townships around the Linden area, and that is District 59. And I am on the House Utilities Committee, House Judiciary Committee, and House Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee. Corrections and Juvenile Justice and Judiciary have already been hard at work. I think we've heard over 10 bills already in the Corrections Committee, as well as having 3 informational-only presentations from the Department of Commerce, from the Kansas Sentencing Commission, from the Pew Charitable Trust and Council of State Governments on some juvenile justice reform issues that are going to be coming forward this session. That's going to be a very hot topic for those in the corrections and juvenile justice field. We'll be looking at some rather large-scale recommendations there. Judiciary, we've already heard. I think we've had 2 informational presentations, and I think we've had hearings on 2 or 3 bills already, which for the first 2 weeks of session is what, as the public, you'd like to see happen. But the reality is that most of the time, those first couple of weeks of session are kind of a slow, lurching start forward for committees and getting bills heard. This is the second year of the biennium, so what that means is all of the bills that were filed last year that if they went to the right committees and were blessed are still alive. There are bills from the last session that can be heard again this year. The old saying that nothing ever truly dies in Topeka is particularly appropriate in the second year of the biennium. So the bullets, so to speak, can fly at you from all different directions this year, and committees can get started and kind of hit the ground running with some of those things. A couple of things that I'm working on this session. One is an idea that came right here from home from Chris Patton at COF. It's a tax weight loss proposal. It's a proposal that would help move people who are otherwise on public assistance to productive work by utilizing tax credits for private employers to help put those people to work. And that's not just in the intellectual and developmental disabilities community, but that's across the spectrum. So kudos to Chris for his work that would benefit not only COF and its clients, but the whole state of Kansas. It's a great idea, and it's a complicated idea, and it's one that we have worked on several years in a row, and I think we are pending changes from the federal CMS, the Centers for Medicaid. I think we're getting close to having something that will work, and hopefully the chairman of tax will give us a hearing on that. We can begin moving that forward in the House. So also working on the juvenile justice reform package that I mentioned. That is a big one. The bill's going to be dropped in the Senate this coming week, and then we'll move towards the House, so we've got a lot going on there with that. And then obviously, any of you who are reading the newspapers and you see the headlines about all of the things that are happening in Topeka, between lease purchase agreements for power plants that we didn't know anything about in the legislature, to dress codes, to all sorts of exciting, fun things with the budget. We can talk about any or all of those this morning, and I'll stop monologuing so we can hear your questions. Thank you all.
Thank you. Now, you've all had an opportunity to be thinking about questions. It's the way this works. We expect one question from everybody. Okay? So are you still thinking? I'll lead off with a couple easy ones here. And legislators have our sheet there, so we'll start off with number 2, the reliability of the legal system. First one there says Kansas legislator and the governor have had public disputes with courts. The Kansas Highway Patrol recently announced they were having problems hiring new recruits. And one of the things that I saw, they were talking about introducing a $5 fee on vehicle registration. We talked a little bit about that the other day in the legislative committee, and the fee is not a tax. You're supposed to smile on that one. Okay. There have been no raises for prison guards in 7 years, causing a 30 to 38% turnover rate. Lack of funds have caused Osawatomie State Hospital to be understaffed and lose medical certification, and I hear that the same thing could be brewing with Lawner State Hospital. And the KBI recently revealed they are not investigating some felonies due to the lack of resources. What are the solutions to providing more resources to ensure our entire state justice system remains fair and our citizens are protected? Well, we start with Senator Tyson.
Well, you covered a lot of material in there, but basically what it's going to...
That's a 60-second answer.
Okay, there you go. Well, I can answer it in less than that. It's going to boil down to how we treat our state employees and the incentives to work for the government. And I'm not... It was very prevalent in the hearing for Osawatomie State Hospital this week. They have the money. The money's there to hire more staff and to increase the salary for the current staff. In fact, I made a motion last year to increase by $500,000 for labor and support to staff. Now, we're not assured that money goes there because the departments and agencies can use that money where they want, even though we ask them or tell them to use it in a certain place. And you know, everybody's talking about the tax issue. It's not a taxing issue. We have a spending problem in Topeka, and it's very prevalent with the administration, what came out this week. We were told that the Department of Administration signed a bonding issue for over $16 million. None of the legislators were aware of it. It happened, over in December. Yeah, they put us on the hook, so we're going to end up spending between $20 and $30 million to tear down the docking building. For those of you that don't know, the heating and air conditioning for the Capitol is underneath the docking building. And so that's what that bonding was for, was to move those units. And not only are they going to move it, we just finished the north lawn and remodeling the Capitol. Well, they're going to tear that up. That's part of where the move goes to. It goes down Van Buren Street. It's just, we have a spending problem in Topeka, and it's very prevalent when we see things like this go on.
Want me to go next? Sure. All right. Yeah, you did cover a lot of material here. I can tell you that I was in a meeting recently with the chair of the House Budget Subcommittee on Public Safety and Transportation. The Highway Patrol issue, they were down about 100 troopers. They have closed that gap by 25 this year with one of the largest recruiting classes that they've ever had. There is discussion of a $2.50 surcharge. It was as high as $7.50, and then we've heard $5, and then $3 and $2.50, I think is the number now on, I believe, the title side, not on the registration side, for those applications to help fund incentives. And the new pay package seems to be working. Again, that large recruiting class would indicate that there is some correlation between that pay and the number of recruits that we get. So they are moving forward. Raises for prison guards is absolutely problematic. We have a huge turnover issue. One of the things we're dealing with in corrections, one of those presentations we got was from the acting secretary, Johnny Goddard, about prison guard turnover, and it is a money issue. We talk about spending and tax, and I'll differ a little bit with the senator because we do have a revenue issue in Topeka, and if you're going to pay people, you've got to have the money to pay them. And when we don't have the money to pay them, they're going to leave, and they're going to take jobs somewhere else, and prison guard is a demanding job. It is a job that we can make more going to work at the American Eagle warehouse here in Ottawa or going to work for Walmart than you can being a prison guard in the state of Kansas. And so given the choice of walking down those halls and dealing with what prison guards deal with, or going and throwing boxes all day, for $4 or $5 more an hour, the starting wage for prison guard in Kansas is in the $13 range. So if you want those people, you're going to have to pay them. The Osawatomie State Hospital issue is another one. We've not properly spent money there to have renovations, to be compliant, to have our certification, to have the census we should have. And the reality is with that, you pay for it there, you pay for it with your county sheriff's department, with your police departments, with your mental health centers. Those people are in crisis. And if we cannot get them into a bed where they can become stabilized and we can deal with the problem they're facing, they are going to end up in county jails, they're going to end up hurting themselves or hurting someone else, and all of us at large will pay for that. And so, as Topeka says we're going to pull back and pay less for those things, the local price tag goes up because we have multiple police officers and sheriff's deputies responding to those cases, and now we're talking about implementing a property tax lid so that we can't afford to pay for those services at the local level. So it is problematic if the state pulls out and expects it just to happen without being compensated. KBI does have a backlog at their labs. We built a new lab, but we're finding that we don't have the staff to service the lab and actually check through the cases and perform the studies that need to be done. So all of that points to a problem, and I agree with the senator in this. We have a spending problem in that we're spending on the wrong things. We're spending on tearing down a functional building and replacing the power plant at a cost of $20 to $30 million when we should be talking about how to provide basic services to the citizens of the state of Kansas in the best possible way.
All right. I'll repeat what these my colleagues just said. There's a lot in that single question. Things that we didn't talk about is just about the Kansas legislature and the governor basically having disputes with the courts, which seems like it's every other day. Here's the deal. The legislature, my understanding is that we're supposed to be in charge of the purse, although at every turn it feels like we are not at all in charge of the purse, yet we're held accountable for that. So, and both of these two have mentioned things where it's taken right out of our hands, or it's done without us knowing it, or just if you go outside of the state, anybody can bond, just go get a loan for it, So it's difficult to be in a position where you're in charge of something that you can't even properly maneuver. There's constant disputes with the courts telling us that we spent it wrong, or that it's too much or too little, that kind of thing. And so that's very frustrating because, and it's something, honestly, I don't know necessarily what the fix is. One of the things that people have said is the way that our judges, and this was one of your questions, the way our judges are chosen, and I tend to agree with that. But along with that, I want to go back to Osawatomie State Hospital. There, unless you're real keen on the history there, it's not necessarily about the way that money was spent. I know money plays a role, but it really comes down to somebody going and checking the hospital and saying it's all good, and then a little while later, all of the rules change. They go back and check it and say now it's all bad. Change it. You got 60 days. And how do you do that? How do you fix that? It's like, it doesn't matter how much money you put into it. You don't have beds for people because you have to take this many beds and set them aside to fix, while this many beds. And so that's why you get a moratorium. That's why you get things, a moratorium. Essentially, you have a person that needs to come to the hospital, they can't come, or they have to wait. And so I believe that Osawatomie State Hospital has done its best to keep up with the demand, considering the demands that have been put on it during this time. Personally, I believe that first of all, you have to have clear vision. You can't just throw money at something if you don't know where you're going with it. And I'm talking about not just Osawatomie State Hospital, I'm talking about our mental health system. And so with that, we could say that it's a money issue, but I don't think there's the backing to really, when it comes to staff and stuff like that, as Senator Tyson was saying, the money's there. It's just trying to keep people, get the right people in those positions has been difficult. And so ultimately, that's what I believe the state is working on. They are working to get the funding back from the federal level. They actually said that in our in a meeting I was in the other day, committee meeting, combined Senate and House, so they are working to get that, that funding back from the federal level. But ultimately, even if they get that funding back, I still feel like it's on the defensive, and I still feel like we need to move forward with a clear vision for our mental health system, so.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to the audience. If you have any questions, we've got a couple people that will be carrying the mic around. If they can't reach you, they'll pass it down, but you pass it back. If they can reach you, they're not giving up the mic. We don't, once you get that mic, you're not going to let go of it. So this is a control. Question?
Representative Finch kind of touched on the tax cap lid. I know that's talked about being stepped up a bit to this July. Is there any talk of even repeal?
There is a bill in the House side that would repeal the tax lid. There's a bill on the Senate side that moves it up and limits some of the exceptions to that. I know there are efforts ongoing right now, Mike, to try to put the sides in the same room and talk about a compromise. My understanding is there's some problems with timing based on when cities and counties set their budgets in August and the amount of time that would be available to have an election if there was an increase beyond the rate of inflation. And it's basically, as the calendar goes, it's not workable in its present form. And the bill in the Senate that simply moves it up to this year would create problems from an election timing standpoint. So I know there are some efforts underway by both sides in that to talk about some workable compromises that may be able to be reached on that. So we're kind of waiting to see how that conversation plays out.
Yeah, as the representative said, there are, both sides have come together and started working. In fact, some of the people that voted against the bill last year have looked at what's been proposed, and they like that better. So I'm hopeful that we can come up for a solution that fits all. It's, you know, we say one thing in Topeka, we say we want, you know, local control, like the block grant, we give local control there, but then on the flip side, turn around and pass legislation that ties locals' hands. So we need to be consistent and actually practice what we preach in Topeka. So.
Somebody else?
My name's Penny Coonch, and I'm a consumer of the mental health community. So how this, with the hospitals and all of the mental health system affects me greatly. And my question is there anybody going to go into these services, including the Elizabeth Layton Center, and check out whether they're following the policies or not? Because from my understanding, they're not.
I can start, and maybe Senator Tyson can finish. Penny, first of all, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your question. I was just visiting the Elizabeth Layton Center. I believe all of us were over there, and I know the folks well there. One of the biggest questions that they have is the turnover in leadership at the state level. We just got a new secretary that deals with the mental health system in Kansas, and so it's the policies themselves being followed there in the Elizabeth Layton Center would be like the rules or those things. I believe for the most part they are following the policies, but to answer your question, essentially if we're not giving clear policy to them or clear understanding of what they have to do, that's where the confusion lies. And so they're working their best with what they've been given. Is that answering your question?
You're answering my question. I'm not happy with the answer, but you're answering my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe Senator Tyson. Yeah.
Well, mental health is a big issue, and it's been on my radar for a while now, and the only positive or rainbow that I can see in all this is that it's on other people's attention finally. So it is getting the attention that it needs and deserves. We have some major issues over at Osawatomie State Hospital. The administration currently is in a push to privatize. And so it's kind of like the canned care system. I don't understand that. You know, we Kansans are very compassionate people. We do want to help those that cannot help themselves. And what we've done with CanCare and what they're looking at doing with mental health is creating another layer of bureaucracy. They would put these out for bid to a private company to manage our mental health, which is what they did with our Medicaid, Medicare system. So, I don't support that. We're fighting that effort in Topeka. It's not a good situation. Part of the issue, too, and Representative Jones touched on it, we have a management issue at the hospital. And so there may be something that needs to be looked into our local, CMS, not CMS, but the local mental health facilities, too, that are privatized. I don't know who inspects those at this point, but that's a question that needs to be asked in Topeka, and it would demonstrate the issues that could arise if we were to privatize the hospital in Osawatomie. So mental health has impacted law enforcement, it's impacted families, communities. It's a big issue. It's statewide. Osawatomie Hospital serves between 44 and 46 counties in the state, and it's the majority of the population of the state of Kansas. It's all the eastern part of the states that it serves. So it is such a critical part of our system here. We're studying it, we're pushing for it, and we're working on items to fix the solution, but we are fighting the administration in this issue, so.
Other questions? Oh, I am holding it, I'm sorry. I promise I'll give it back. I'm Amanda Edwards, and I consider this question kind of one of the big elephants in the room. I'm no longer a school board member, I'm no longer a parent of a child in school, but I'm always fascinated by the logistics of how you get from point A to point B. There's a lot of talk about school consolidation and how we should have a lot fewer districts and so forth. But realistically, and especially if you're in a little more spread out area, how in the world, what time of the day do you start, and how do you tie it all together so you have, I'll just say, half as many school districts?
Well, I'm from a small community. You guys know, represent 6 counties, it's small communities. I don't think we should do forced consolidation. And I haven't seen the bill that's in the House. I don't know the particulars of it. We do need to do something with our school systems. There is a lot of money out there on the table. I was told a number, I think it's exorbitantly high, but one of the superintendents from the Olathe School District is, they're talking $250,000 to $500,000 salary. So I'm not sure consolidation is the answer, though, especially when you've got children on school buses, an hour a day. And again, it's local control. If local schools want to consolidate, they will consolidate because they will see that that is what needs to be done.
The bill is on the House side, introduced by a representative from the Leavenworth area. It basically says in counties of a certain population, they would go to one school district. If numbers of students are a certain level, it would just be one countywide school district. It would have the effect of consolidating administration. The reality is that, like most other entities, the largest volume of dollars spent in school districts across the state, like many private businesses, is salaries and benefits for staff. And that's not just administrators, that's teachers and janitors and librarians and coaches and all of that. So unless you're going to close buildings and make class sizes bigger and lay off teachers, you're not going to save money by doing that. So, that's the question. The most recent data I've seen says across the state of Kansas, school districts in the aggregate spend 9% of all their funds on administrative overhead. A Fortune 500 company that spends 11% is considered exceptional. We do it for 2% less. And yet that is always the boogeyman when we talk about school finance in this state, is what we pay administrators. So Should we look at it? Yes. Should it be efficient and commensurate with their duties? Absolutely. Should we also be realistic about what it takes to run public education in this state? Yes. And that is a more general conversation, and that is not going to be solved by simple, well, we'll make them all one county school district and everything will be fine. Because as you said, Almeda, the devil is in the details, and it is in how we get from point A to point B. And unless we're going to repeat the sins of the past and force consolidation on rural school districts, we're not going to be saving money with this system.
I appreciate the question, and this is, this kind of hits close to home. The question itself, here's the thing, when it comes to consolidation, the actual word consolidation, it seems like it's the political word that everybody puts out there immediately when something comes up. I try to do my best when I hear consolidation to say, okay, what are you talking about? Because it's scary to hear that word. I don't think that the bill that Representative Finch is talking about is really, I mean, it's consolidation, but it's not like taking or Ottawa and Wellsville and making Wellsville go to Ottawa or Ottawa go to Wellsville. It's like that. This particular bill would be essentially, and I don't know everything about it. I didn't even know if he had it introduced yet. He just handed it to me, and it's actually out there. If Jerry wanted to pass it or whatever, he gave it to me. The other thing is the efficiency study, I handed that out, so if you have that, continue passing it, looking through it, whatever. And I also have something on the Osawatomie State Hospital, their latest thing that you guys can look at and everything. But what I personally try and do, if somebody says consolidation, say, okay, what do you mean? And what the representative brought forward was something that was started by Representative Yoder years ago, and just kind of thrown under the table. And so it has to do with basically making the school districts just county lines. So Wellsville would be in the same school district as Ottawa. And so there's, and I actually agree with Representative Finch and Representative Tyson when it comes to, you can't just take small districts out there and be like, here's what's going to happen. It's not going to, I don't see it happening. There's just not the will of the people to actually consolidate our schools. But if there's something that we can do that's actually going to save money, I would be open to it. It would just have to. It would have to make sense. And this particular bill also, I asked the representative, I said, where this come from? Because where it comes from says a lot. And he said it was brought to him by administrators. Well, then the question is, well, if administrators, superintendents brought that, where did they come from? And so ultimately, this could be a rural-urban issue. And so that's possibly what this particular bill really is. It's just about rural-urban, so.
Other questions?
So Jerry's bill?
Sorry. I'm Jerry Hinn, Superintendent at Wellsville. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. And Representative Jones, I need to ask for a raise. If somebody's $250,000, I need to ask for a raise. First of all, thank you for your time. I appreciate that very much. I guess my comments are, in the state of Kansas, we have several resources. Sorry, is that you?
You don't need it?
No, someone was buzzing. The way I see it, we have agriculture is a huge asset to the state of Kansas. Several businesses that are quite big, and then we have our kids, and we have our people in the state of Kansas. And my concerns come from the aspect of federal government basically takes care of our agriculture. They take care of them pretty well. We've taken care of our large businesses and LLCs. When are we going to take care of the people? And I'm concerned from that aspect that I think you have those intentions. I truly believe that, because we elect you to do that. And that's what I want to continue to see. But it seems like sometimes we get to that point of we're not looking at the people, we're taking care of other things. And maybe that's my question, is how do we focus on the people in the state of Kansas to really take care of these issues that we're having right now? I know it's a very broad question. You probably cannot answer that. But obviously, I'm going to take care of my kids in Wellsville. I'm going to take care of the kids in the state of Kansas if I can. And we've cut over $700,000 in our budget since I've been there in 3 years. I'm worried about that. So if there's a question there, please answer it. If there's not, we'll move on to the next question.
I think what you've asked is honestly a very personal thing for each of us, and it's almost a why do we do this? For me, my faith informs what I do. When Jesus said, as you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. It's also balancing the fact that this is all of the taxpayers' money. And, economics is dealing with decisions that have to be made with the scarcity of resources. We simply don't have enough money to ease everyone's suffering, to solve every person's problem, and I wish we did. And so it's about prioritizing. Where can we do the most good with the funds that we utilize, and how can we truly help people's lives to be better while still respecting the basic duties of government, which is to secure people's rights and to preserve liberties, and then to help where we can help. So for me, I try to keep that in front of me daily. I try to think on that, and meditate on that, and pray on that, so that those decisions that I make are informed by that as I make them. And everybody brings their own take to that, Jerry, and how they choose to deal with it. We are in a time right now where we forget too often when we look at a spreadsheet of budget numbers that those do impact real people. They impact children in classrooms, and they impact people who are struggling with mental health issues, and they impact rural hospitals. And the reality is that 90 cents of every dollar spent by the state of Kansas is spent on education or human services. 90 cents of every dollar. And so when we say we're just going to cut spending across the board, which is what some people want to do, 3%, 5%, 10%, that has a very real human consequence. And we need to be very sober and very deliberative and very cautious when we talk about those cuts if we are going to change people's lives for the worse. And really, we should be looking at ways to build in efficiency to change their lives for the better.
Yeah, and I know some of the questions you're asking without asking too, just being on the school board there, USD 289. But yeah, one of the things that I appreciate and I hope works is the efficiency study that's out there. Some of the things, we've talked about when we re-up our insurance and things like that. We talk about those things and ask about them. I asked the teachers. I said, "Is this good insurance for you guys?" And if they shake their head, I'm like, "Why are we doing this type of thing?" Well, it's grandfathered. It's cheaper this way. We've never really asked insurance that other schools are doing, or maybe all the schools are doing. And so efficiency is we can save money by all the schools using the same type of insurance. Well, so do you take that power away from the local school board and do it as a state or not? And those are some of the efficiency things that we can actually look at. If we agree with Baldwin and with Ottawa and with some of the other districts, Central Heights, and say, hey, we can get a better price for this, that would be a way, And so, I understand when you start getting into block grants, you start getting into the school funding formula, and the whole state's trusting us to come, my gosh, and also when we're doing cuts and things like that. But, to be fair, also we're looking at, and we've talked about this, but we're getting a new track, or we're thinking about redoing the track, or now the track doesn't necessarily need to be done for a couple of years. So it's, there's a lot of us who want another teacher, or we want another this or that. The questions are big questions, and I appreciate, and I know, first of all, I appreciate you being here. Secondly, asking that question. But thirdly, that you care about the kids. And I know that your heart is the same as the superintendent here and the superintendent south. And, I know that's what you want. And so ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. I also appreciate what Representative Blaine Finch said about the amount of money that this state puts into education. But again, as I said before, we're in charge of the budget. Or are we? So it's kind of a difficult issue there. So.
There's so many issues before us, and I ran for office for a smaller, more efficient government. You guys know, you've heard me talk about being a software contractor and seeing all the waste in government. And, it's one thing to have the money, but it is very important how we're spending the money and where we're putting the money. And we can demonstrate so many ways that the money's not getting where it needs to. And be it the employees at the hospital or to some of the classrooms. Now, rural schools do a great job, but we have an emergency fund with the block grant. And one of the schools that applied for that funding, they were awarded they were awarded the money, and they're going to build a new tennis court with that money. I don't see that as an emergency fund, but it did happen. And so like I said, we've got good people, good schools, but we've got some that the money is just not getting where it needs to. And so we need to be diligent and oversight. I do know that the Senate is proposing a bill to put restrictions on the administration as to where they can spend the money. And it's probably a good thing. After a $16 million bond is cut, and we're on the hook for it, KDOT just let a $400 million bond. And the secretary was here in Ottawa, just a month ago, saying that they're doing fine, that they have enough resources to do their projects and do what they have. But then they let a $400 million bond. So we need to dig in. The more the government grows, the less freedom we have. And this administration, we continue to grow government at the state and the federal level, and we just can't have that. We need to fight for our freedoms and for a more efficient government.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Oh, sorry, hold it. Jeannie Sharp, Ottawa. I want to swing back around to a question. Senator Tyson raised the issue of the amount of money that was bonded for the docking building, which would have been, I assume, the executive branch, administration that made that decision.
Department
Correct?
of Administration.
Yes. So then I also heard Representative Jones say that the judiciary is the problem, and the judiciary is the one that is taking money control out of you guys' hands to control the purse strings.
I said that I feel like that.
Okay, so I also heard you say that you wanted to have a clear vision for judiciary. So I guess I want to know what your vision is, your clear vision for what the judiciary branch should be doing, and why there would be, what would be accomplished by taking money away from that branch.
Well, I don't know about taking money from the branch. I don't think that's the way to go. They've got to operate, and we've got a bill before the Senate that allows them to have some of their fees back and stuff. But what we do have in Kansas is we have a judicial branch that tends to legislate from the bench. A prime example is the Carr brother case. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that or not. It was a murder trial in Wichita. It was horrific. 4 individuals were murdered. There was an eyewitness that lived, and she testified, and they were convicted with death in the state of Kansas. And our judges, our bench, our Supreme Court overruled that verdict. And so thankfully, last week, they were overruled on an 8-1 ruling, or it was overturned. So, we just can't have a judicial system that is legislating from the bench. I'm not fighting our judicial. In fact, one of the lawyers has contacted me. The judicial branch has required that they file electronically now, that they can't manually file their paperwork. And so they want us to create legislation that would stop that. Well, I would like to see it stopped, but I don't think the legislature should be telling the judicial how they should do their business. So it is, we have 3 separations. It's back to, elementary education as far as government. There's 3 branches of government in Kansas, and we need to balance that. Right now, we have, though it's hard to see the separate branches in Kansas, and we need to get back to that, the separation of government.
That tension between the branches of government is inherent in our system, and it goes clear back to the founding of this country. I would hate to see a day where we don't have that, because I think that's what makes this a democracy, is that we have those branches rubbing up against each other and being in conflict about where those lines are. That is the nature of a republic form of government. You talk about separation of powers. I want to clarify a couple things. The Carr brothers case, the Supreme Court of Kansas did not overturn the verdict. They said there were errors in the sentencing phase. They applied an overly expansive view of the federal Eighth Amendment that was corrected by the United States Supreme Court in an 8-1 decision this week. I agree with the Supreme Court of the United States' decision. I think that if any two people in the state of Kansas deserve to be put to death any more than the folks who committed the Clutter murders from in cold blood, it's these two. And I hope that we will now have swift justice for those victims and the girl who survived, and these two will be put to death quickly. But we must ensure that everyone's constitutional rights are protected all the way down the line, and we must do it right. And there is nothing wrong with an other court overruling the lesser court and coming to the right conclusion. That's the way our system is designed to work. We can't short-circuit that. We can't go around that. Justice has to take time, has to be heard by the appropriate court, and the decisions have to be made. As to school finance and the courts, I don't like it any more than the next person, but in our system of government, at the state level and the federal level, courts interpret the laws that are passed by the legislative branch. That includes the state constitution passed and approved by the people of the state, which says that the legislature will make suitable provision for the educational interests of the state. Who interprets that? The courts interpret the Constitution. They interpret every article, every amendment. That's their job. And to say that we don't like them doing their job is really an infringement on their powers granted to them under the Constitution and under separate acts of the United States Congress. That's the way our system works. You want to talk about separation of powers. I have real heartburn about what's going on in the executive branch right now. We have a problem because we do not carry an ending cash balance in the state's general fund. When that happens, by statute, the governor has what's called allotment authority, meaning he can unilaterally choose to cut budgetary funds that have been allocated by the legislature of the state of Kansas. The governor becomes a one-man wrecking crew on the state budget with the complicitness of the majority of legislators who will not fund an ending cash balance sufficient to prevent him from doing so. So you have an executive branch who has almost unfettered budgetary authority right now, who is entering into unprecedented lease purchase agreements for almost $20 million to fund the demolition of a building which has really been rejected by the legislature at one point, and to rebuild a power plant, as the good senator said, and deface the north lawn of the State House that we just spent all of this taxpayer money to put together. And it's almost like the child deferring the parent's wrath. Don't look at what I did, look what they did over there. Well, yeah, he's pointing across the street at the courts, but folks, this stuff that's going on is the executive branch. The overspending right now is the executive branch, with really without a good basis and legal authority for doing so. I mean, yes, there's the allotment statutes, yes, there's the ability to enter into lease purchases, but you talk about separation of powers. As Representative Jones rightly points out, the power of the purse belongs to the legislature, but look who's really running the budget right now.
I appreciate that question. I appreciate that question, Jeannie. One of the things that you talked about was vision. When I said vision, I meant for our mental health system. I think it's important to have a clear way that you're going when it comes to our mental health system, because I believe that's absolutely detrimental. You're asking for vision when it comes to the judges and things like that. And I don't know that I necessarily I don't even know if I necessarily have a vision. I think Representative Finch is correct when it comes to the tension. There should be a tension. And so when I answered the way I did, what I'm showing you is my side of that. I get frustrated with the way, I say ruling, but I understand that it is just a, what do you call it? Not a recommendation. It's the
Judicial opinion.
Opinion, thank you. Opinion of the court. But most people don't understand that. And so when they actually make an opinion, we take it as that's what it is. And honestly, most other courts will follow those opinions and rule the same way, and so it's just kind of how it works. And so if they make an opinion and everybody rules the same way, then essentially that's the rule of the land. That's the way it should go, and it's like it's law. And so for those of us who who are on the side of hey, this is, you get $20, and the courts say nope, it has to be 25. That's frustrating. So yeah, you're seeing some of the frustration, I guess, and the tension. That is a good thing. Yet at the same time, it's frustrating on my side because yeah, it's out of my hands. So.
Brittany Potter, Ottawa. So my question is for all of you. Has the Kansas legislative branch considered the beneficial impact of front-loading expenses, I guess is how I would call it? If we would invest, and it truly is an investment, if we would invest in the education of our youth, if we would invest in appropriate and adequate mental health services, and if we would stop using regressive forms of taxation and we would actually invest in redeveloping communities, and there are houses that are abandoned or falling apart, if we would put money into those types of things and provide reasonable living costs for people, then on the back end, we would have significantly lower issues in the justice system. We would have fewer criminal expenses. We would have people who are living happier, healthier lives and more productive citizens, creating jobs. I mean, the whole thing, if we would just spend that money and invest in the beginning, it's just like investing in your retirement plan. It compound interest on life, and we would be in a much better position today, or if we started today, in 20 years, 50 years, if that was the mentality that people would go into these sessions with when writing bills.
Start with that. I think many people do start with that. I think most legislators, I dare say maybe all, go there with the right motivations to try to do exactly what you're talking about. As I said earlier, we're dealing with unlimited wants and limited resources, and there is a price to be paid for every one of those upfront services. And a transition, as Ms. Edwards said, from point A to point B, it can be costly because we're still paying for the back-end services that we didn't invest in earlier. So the real trick is, how do you, within the existing framework and without making everyone's taxes so high that they throw up their hands and say, why am I still living in Kansas? How do you have that balance? And I think you're seeing that in various areas. You're seeing that in terms of juvenile justice reform, trying to get smarter on crime at the juvenile level, trying to get smarter on crime at the adult level. Do we really need to lock up nonviolent offenders and spend $25,000 a year each to keep them housed in prisons, or are there things we can do on the front end to deal with that? We had a commitment to funding early childhood education at a pretty robust level. Those are some of the cuts that have been made and transfers that have been made by the executive branch using their allotment authority. And I hate to see that change. I think it's important that we do invest in some of those things, but the reality is every investment really means we're spending money. And so it's that balance between the unlimited want to say, if we had all the money in the world, boy, look what we could do, and the reality that we don't, and it's not fair to expect taxpayers to pay an increasingly heavy burden without being able to show those results. So I think we are trying to get to results-driven policies that spend the taxpayers' money as wisely as possible.
Go ahead.
That's a great question, and what I'd love to do, like last session was a prime example, is take a legislator's palm card or what they handed out, their material when they campaigned, and lay it on their desk and remind them why they ran for office and who they're representing in Topeka. That is so critical. I think you get up there, and I've heard a great quote. It says, you go up there to be part of the solution, and before you know it, you're part of the problem. And you know, you've got to have good, grounded values and people around you that keep you focused onto where your target is, because it's so easy to start listening to the noise, the background noise in Topeka, and not pay attention to your district and your constituents. So you just need strong people representing you, and I am fighting for us in Topeka to represent us to the best.
I just want to say it real quick, if we're getting close to the end. All I wrote down for your question was front-loading expenses. And the one thing that I can say, considering that, is when we first got married, we front-loaded expenses. We wanted to live in what we were buying. In other words, so we got a mortgage, we had a car on payment, we had all the different stuff. Now, I'm not talking just about education, I'm not talking just about our mental health system or just about our pension system, but our state, although we can't be more than $1 million in debt, we have a bonding authority that has, across the state, it's like $21 billion bonded. We have front-loaded expenses, but then you have us, who have been here for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, and then somebody else comes up, and they have their promises, and they deal with the issues on defense for the most part. And so we've been front-loading expenses a lot for a long, long time. And so, yeah, we can make that same choice to do it again, and do it again, and do it again, but when we front-load, somebody's going to pay it down the road. And the county, when they front-load by getting a new school or a new jail or something like that, or a city does the same thing, somebody's going to pay for it down the road. And we have to continue looking at it. We have to be real smart, and it's very difficult decisions to make. So anyway, that's the only thing I got from that. I should say, when I saw front-loaded expenses, I went, oh man, because that's way bigger than a lot of us really know, so.
One last question.
David Potter from Ottawa. As I hear the discourse coming from Topeka and again here in front of us this morning, the focus continues to be on spending, and obviously that is a concern. There is wasteful government spending taking place, and that's part of the issue that we're facing. But that's only half the budgetary battle, and from what I'm hearing, it sounds as though there's this fixed amount that we could possibly have to work with, when in reality, our state's tax structure, the way the structure of taxation that we have in this state is not providing sufficient funds to support the agencies that the people in this room and the people in this state rely on frequently to live their lives. And so why are we not looking at bringing more income to the state by means other than regressive forms of taxation, like a sales tax that disproportionately puts that burden on the backs of our poorest citizens? Why are we not looking at more ways to generate revenue and instead just pointing to specific cases where we can say, hey, look, that's wasteful government spending? Why are we not trying to bring in more money?
Short answer.
I'll start. I'm conservative, but, and this is just being short, everything's on the table.
Last year, the legislature passed the largest tax increase in Kansas history. So taxes have been raised. The governor said he would veto any measure that would fix the disparity in LLC taxation and Subchapter S taxation in the state. So the legislature was stopped from passing any fix to that income tax problem. The income tax package that was passed in 2012 was never even the governor's vision, and it was an error, and it's costing us still to this day, and it's not been fixed. And that's the real problem with revenues at the state level at this point. And until that's fixed, I think you're going to continue to see the same structural problems with state tax, state revenue, and state spending.
Well, I didn't run for office to raise your taxes, and we do have a taxing issue in Kansas. We have tax code that picks winners and losers, and that is not fair to anyone in Kansas. So until we can get movement on the tax code and to really study the code, they had an interim tax committee this year, and what that interim committee was to talk about was removing sales tax exemptions. Well, the number one issue they were going at was agriculture sales tax exemptions. And I'll tell you, the bill is still alive that would raise property tax on agriculture. I've been in the committee hearing with that same senator that is pushing the bill. He has mentioned that every single time he gets the microphone, almost. The only committee he hasn't brought it up in, oh, I forget. No, he did bring it up in education also. So we need a fair and tax code that does not pick winners and losers, that's fair across the board.
Okay, we want to thank Senator Tyson, Representative Finch, and Representative Jones for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this morning, to listen to your constituents. We are your constituents, but we voted for you or not. So let's give them a round of applause. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here this morning. You know, the only way that you learn is to come and ask questions, get the answers, provide input. Our representatives don't know everything. And if you think that they do and you don't provide the input, then you get what you've got. Last two announcements. The next legislative coffee is February 13th. The Chamber Legislative Tour is February 25th. Costs $45, so be thinking about that. And the next meeting in February, we'll have a sign-up sheet in the back. Thank you.
There's one back there now, Rick.